Hi, people. So I've just seen a clip from Yahoo News on Prime Minister's questions, and the big focus point today was that Keir Starmer was criticising both the Prime Minister, but particularly the Foreign Secretary, on their response to the fall of Kabul, and specifically what Starmer was saying was their lack of action. Um, Very specifically, he was criticizing Dominic Raab for being on holiday in Crete while desperate people were at Kabul airport. Well, actually, he didn't say that, but that was obviously the picture he was painting. He started by praising our ambassador in Kabul, who was trying his best to get paperwork to people to fast track that so they could get out of the country. And I think Starmer was right to praise that professionalism. Diplomats, ambassadors, um, have one of the most challenging jobs in politics, especially in troubled parts of the world. And I think the average person kind of doesn't appreciate how hard their job is. Not only are you balancing out being a representative of your country in another country, sometimes under volatile circumstances like this, but you have the responsibility potentially for hundreds and thousands of expats. It's a difficult and challenging thing. It can also be a rewarding thing, diplomatically speaking. But I respect diplomats broadly speaking. So I think Starmer was right to praise him or her. I don't know the person who's in the post at the moment, but I think that was right to praise them. Um, but I want to focus a little bit on this criticism of Raab, i.e., he was on holiday in Crete. Now, these optics of a leader on holiday as a crisis unfolds is something that has a long history in politics, certainly in British politics. Famously, there was a time during the Winter of Discontent when James Callaghan was perhaps unfairly attributed with the crisis, what crisis line. Now, of course, he never said that. As always, the tabloids, merge words together and they get their headline. Um, but here's the thing: I really, really doubt that Dominic Raab, as he got news that Kabul fell to the Taliban, would have just been lounging on a deck chair on a beach in Crete. He was in Crete, but likely he was trying to get to the airport to get back here. I imagine the foreign secretary would have some sort of special RAF flights or something. But I imagine that would have been the situation. Um, I very much doubt he would have just sat there and been complacent. It's a little bit of a cheap shot by Starmer. In a sense, Starmer's only doing his job, holding the government to account. But this is something that's, a long-standing. Oh, you were on holiday whilst the crisis unfolded. Um, Dominic Raab was angry, so was the Prime Minister, and they kind of heckled Starmer, "What would you have done?" Um, and he said, you could hear him say, "I wouldn't have been on holiday." But the problem there is, world events unfold dramatically, right? So, Crete, I assume, is on our green list locations. Politicians need holidays. I don't agree with those who say, oh, they should never take holidays. Of course they should. They're in demanding, pressurizing jobs. Um, so they're entitled to a holiday now and again. If he was on holiday, what could he physically do other than just try to get back as soon as possible and coordinate as best he could in the circumstances that he was in? Don't get me wrong, I'm not getting out to be Raab a victim. He's not. Um, the victims here are the people of Afghanistan. But I just think it's an interesting talking point. Is it fair criticism? Now, some might be partisan because they don't like the Tories and say, "Oh yeah, that's typical Tories on holiday." But I just think it's perhaps an unfair image. Now, I don't know. Maybe he was lounging around, but I just think it's a little bit of a cheap shot by Starmer because a Labour Foreign Secretary who was on holiday would have been caught in the same circumstances. I think everyone was surprised by the speed of the Taliban advance. The president was surprised, the prime minister was surprised. Um, One of the most shocking things about all of this is the departure of Ashraf Ghani. Certainly, in fact, he might be the politician who comes out worst from all of this, even more than Biden or Trump. By the way, Donald Trump has been, mouthing off, calling on Biden to resign. Donald Trump was going to do exactly the same thing, in fact, even sooner. So this is just so typical of Trump. When we're talking about politics and partisan criticism, that is so typical of Donald Trump. He would have done not only exactly the same thing, he would have done it even earlier. So this idea that Trump has moral high ground over Biden is pathetic. Um, like I said, there's going to be a lot of analysis over this decision. History might say, well, Biden had a point. We couldn't stay in Afghanistan indeterminately. You know, training the Afghan army, training them and training them and training them, putting all this money in, and even then they weren't prepared. Ultimately, it is the responsibility of the Afghans. On the other hand, there's the moral issue of why was the West in Afghanistan? Well, actually, in terms of the mission, and this is something I don't like. I mean, the Daily Mail's headline was uh, a big glaring headline. Why the hell were they there? And of course, they focus on the death of service personnel, which should never be forgotten. But I think it's a little bit of a misleading narrative in the sense that on the surface you could look, well, we're just back to square one. We went in when the Taliban were in power. They're back in power. But the actual mission of the campaign in Afghanistan was to go after bin Laden. Bin Laden was killed. There hasn't been a terror attack on the scale of 9/11 in 20 years. In that sense, it was successful. Um, so, any analysis of this needs to look at that as well. But it's hard to put a silver lining on it. It's a very bad situation. And, it is back to square one. Taliban assurances on women's rights. The point there is within framework of their version of Islam. In other words, yeah, we'll respect women's rights as long as they're good, obedient Muslim women. Uh, that's pretty much what they're saying. Anyway, I will round this up, but I think it's the easiest thing in the world to criticize. Um, and Starmer's playing politics. He's doing what he has to do as opposition leader, which itself is a very demanding job because there's limits on what an opposition leader can actually do. It's just one thing to be fair to Starmer. The leader of Her Majesty's opposition can't set policies. All he or she can do is to hold the government to account. So in that sense, he's doing his job. But I do think it's a little bit of a cheap shot against Dominic Raab. Now, finally, about Dominic Raab, I personally think he's quite a good foreign secretary. I probably give, if I was to assess his tenure so far, I'd give Dominic Raab maybe 6 out of 10, or a strong five at least. Why? Because to my mind, he has been tougher than pretty much any of his predecessors on China. That's an extremely important issue. I do give Raab credit for that. Maybe people could point to some things he could have handled better. I think coronavirus has just shaken up the world and put every leader to test. But honestly, I really don't think Dominic Raab is that bad a foreign secretary. And I do think that he has been outspoken on China. I give him credit for that because that's very important. Anyway, I'll draw this up. But the decision of the American president, had it been a Labour government in power, a Labour foreign secretary and a Labour prime minister would be being asked the same questions. Don't forget, it was a Labour prime minister who brought it into Afghanistan. So partisan politics. It's politics. That's what happens. But for those of us observing, I just think it would be a bit unfair to sort of think, well, Dominic Raab was just sitting on this lounge chair. He might have been, but I would be personally very surprised if that was the case. Let me know your thoughts.